Welcome to Sheffield Cathedral. My name's Peter Bradley, I'm the Dean, and welcome to this sermon. Like many of us, I've been trying to put into words my experience of the last few months. And I've been particularly caught by a passage in the second book of Kings, chapters 6 and 7. The people of God in Israel, the kingdom of Israel, its capital Samaria, the people of God are in the midst of a siege. The King Ben-Hadad of Aram was laying a long siege to the city of Samaria. And very frighteningly, the sort of collapse of community life and of values and even of faith in the Lord is described. People resort to cannibalism, to cynicism. The king of Israel threatens the prophet with violence, Elisha. And the scriptures paint very vividly a sense of fear, trappedness, and staleness in the city. And then outside the walls, we meet 4 men with leprosy, just standing in the midst, on the one hand, of the army that's encircling Samaria, and on the other hand, of the city itself. And the scriptures sort of invite us into their conversation. These very insignificant people sitting at the gates, unnoticed in a time of violence. And they start a conversation about what they should do in these circumstances. And firstly, they say, we can't go back into the city. There is no life there for us now. They die with famine like anyone else. And then, in their anxiety, they say, well, we could just step back, sit here and watch the violence all happen around us. And then they decide, well, that sort of waiting serves no good now. We're very likely to die anyway. It's comfortable to be detached. But actually, it also is the way of death. And then a third man says, we have no choice. We must go to the camp of the invading army, the Syrians, and give ourselves up. Either they'll kill us and we're dead, or we'll escape and we'll be free. But there's only one way forward, towards the place where we have greatest fear. Now, just reflect, this was a particularly difficult decision for the people of God, for Israelites. They're abandoning these 4 lepers. They're abandoning the city where they have known God to be present and where they've worshipped God. And they're stepping forward to a place where they fear there will be idolatry, where the food will be unclean, and where they may meet violence. They walk forwards in the dark of twilight. And then the scriptures describe how God caused a sudden noise and caused total panic in the invading army. They thought they heard the sounds of a vast Hittite and Egyptian army bearing down upon them. And the soldiers ran away, leaving a totally empty encampment. There's a slightly humorous passage in which the lepers come forward and gradually find there's nobody there. and then they see something to eat and they have something to eat, and then they start running to all the tents thinking, look what's in this one, look what's in this one. Suddenly they're rich and they have an extraordinary sense of freedom and joy. And they could, of course, just remain there, no doubt gather together everything, sell it all and walk away. They found a blessing in the middle of fear. And what's more, a blessing which is the clear action of the Lord. And so they realize they have a duty to go back into the city and share the good news of what they've found. And then, as the story of the scriptures continues, the city is free, people are full of joy, and so the history of God's people continues. This passage has really struck me, partially because it speaks so clearly to my experience, especially in an Anglican cathedral, which in a rather wonderful way is testimony to the place of the people of God and the presence of the story of God in our community for thousands of years, like several of our churches in the diocese. It's important for me to see that I'm not required to administer the past. I'm always called as a Christian forward into the margins and into the new place that might at the moment be a place of fear for me. For any Christian, just remaining safe within the pattern we had before coronavirus. It looks safe, but actually it may be the place of slow famine and exhaustion. Again, for any Christian, just to step back and say, well, I'll just wait and see what happens. That may feel as if it's safe. But these four lepers say too, no, that is also a place of death. God is calling even those on the margins, or perhaps especially them in this story, into a new future, to walk forward to the place of fear and uncertainty, where they fear God may not be, where they fear violence, and then to, as it were, trust solely in God's love for them. I hear this as an invitation to the church today, to a double movement, to go into the places in our communities which seem far from God and which seem most deeply wounded by the experience of coronavirus. People suffering from the famine of loneliness in our society. People who live in poverty, who often have suffered very deeply in coronavirus, and whose experience of suffering may frighten us. Places where the gospel has not often been heard. I believe that God is calling us to enter into those places and allow ourselves to be changed by the God we meet there and the hope God gives. And then to make a second journey, to return, like the lepers, to the place the church has been, giving a message of hope and joy. You know, the lepers didn't say to the city, you've got this all wrong. They say to the city, God gives freedom. He calls us forward. Come and be part of the future. Come from your walls, be changed by the Lord, and come to the new place. A healthy theology of the church, I think a healthy theology of the life of any Christian, understands that we are all the people of God leaving Egypt and being called by the Lord into the desert, the place of uncertainty and fear. As Christians, we are all called by God from the cross to forgiveness and to the life of resurrection. Can we hear, as we emerge from this time of coronavirus, that same voice the 4 lepers heard in 2 Kings 6 and 7? We cannot stay here. Let us go forward. May God give us grace as the people of God to respond to the calling of the Lord. Amen.